You lot are a bit cheeky, a bit naughty, may I suggest. I said I was going to do a video about David Moyes. What would have happened if Pellegrini had never been appointed and David Moyes had kept the job the first time around? That was the theme of it. Somebody had suggested it. I couldn't remember who had suggested it. So I said, could you please remind me? I said, now, don't anybody go claiming to have done it. Just the original person. Four of you. Four of you are claiming to have come up with the idea, and it was very funny, and some Spartacus comments as well, by the way. But I did find, I used the old Sherlock Holmes, and I did find who it was, and it was Logan. So thank you very much, Logan, for suggesting it. It is exactly what I said. What would we have done? How would West Ham be? What would Moyes have done with the team? And if we hadn't have gone through the Pellegrini era, and what would he have done with 100-odd million? Now, we have to travel back in time to do this. And it's Logan, I do appreciate this, mate, because I've actually really enjoyed doing this. Because I've gone back to David Moyes' final game. And I was there. Many of us were there. It was a bit of a party atmosphere. We beat Everton 3-1. Sam Allardyce's Everton as well, so it was quite significant. We did enjoy cupping our ear to him and rubbing his nose in it somewhat, and we got up to 13th in the league. Now, I would remind you that David Moyes had come in when we were in the bottom three, so you'd have to say he'd done quite a remarkable job. I know we shouldn't have forgotten about the team, but there's a couple of names in the team which I found very interesting. But I should probably say, before going any further, we played with three at the back in this one, and Aaron Cresswell played as a left centre half. It was a sign of what he wanted to do, and it was quite interesting looking back at his first stint and showing what he really had in mind. So I think I want to look at that team, and I also want to look at. Let's say, look, I've listened to his press conference, basically post-match press conference. Really interesting, listening to it, knowing that he goes on to get the sack.
No, I can't, because I'm no further forward. We'll meet and talk, I think, next week. We've not arranged the date, we've not arranged a time, so.
Because he's got a meeting with Sullivan lined up at this point. He doesn't know what's going on. And it's also interesting listening to his ideas about West Ham. And I hadn't forgotten it totally, because I've often said that he wanted to strengthen the defence. And that was very much part of it. And I think we also need to look at Pellegrini's signings, just have a look through and see which one of those would Moyes have signed himself or sanctioned. Because people like Ryan Fredericks were already being talked about before David Moyes had left. Ryan Fredericks and Kearney from Fulham, they were being linked to us all the time. And do you remember there was another one, Harry Arter? Remember Harry Arter? We were linked with him all the time. Didn't quite happen. Right, so the team that beat Everton 3-1, and we were all over them. As I say, I was at that game. Big party atmosphere. Last game of the season. Adrian in goal. The back three was Rice, Ogbonna and Cresswell. Rice played as the right centre-back, which is really funny, bearing in mind what we discussed yesterday on the video. Zabaleta played as a wing-back. Kouyate played in central midfield alongside Noble. Masuaku played on the left, but he got an injury and he came off and was replaced by Fernandes after 21 minutes. João Mário, do you remember him? Of course you remember him. It's only 5 minutes ago. But he was on loan deal. Lanzini scored a couple of goals, and Marko Arnautovic, of course. As I say, it was a 3-1 win. So I just want to go through the players one by one, just very quickly, and see if they would have remained. But as I say, at this point, David Moyes thinks he's going in to a meeting with David Sullivan to discuss his future. So looking at the team, Adrian, I think he would have kept him on. We know we're going to speak about Roberto in a minute. He ditched Roberto as soon as he came in. He knows Roberto was no good. Declan Rice, here's the really interesting one. What would have happened with Declan Rice? Well, Declan Rice wouldn't have developed in the way that he developed. Declan Rice would not be playing midfield now. He would not. It was Pellegrini that came in and said, Declan Rice, you're a midfielder, you're not a centre-half. Remember that? It was quite revolutionary stuff, really. So do I think Declan Rice would be playing? I think, yes, he'd be playing. I don't think he would have played as many games as he has now, by the way. And I think he'd be a centre-half. You cannot attribute his move to central midfield, but David Moyes just don't think it was going to happen. Ogbonna, no point even talking about it. Cresswell, again, no point even talking about it. Interestingly, Cresswell, he did bring Ginge on in the 88th minute. So David Moyes showing his, because he thought he was on his way out, obviously, Ginge at that point. But David Moyes was showing his, I don't know, his caring side. There's a nice guy. I always talk about the nice guy, Moyes. 88th minute, brought him on to get applause from the crowd. He made 3 substitutions in the game, by the way. Zabaleta, of course, Zabaleta would have gone. No doubt about that at all. Kouyate, I think David Moyes would have kept Kouyate. I really do. I think he's right up David Moyes' alley. Mark Noble, again, it probably doesn't deserve comment because he's used Mark Noble since then. Masuaku, yes, obviously. João Mário, I think we would have made that deal permanent. I think João Mário deal gets made permanent and the fornicator doesn't come in.
I thought João Mário and Lanzini were always a threat.
Obviously, that's not now, it's a season later, but the fornicator doesn't come in. Manuel Lanzini, who was taken off, scored 2 goals, taken off after 86 minutes for Obiang. So these two are really, really interesting. I am adamant, if Lanzini had not have got injured, then that would have been it. He still would have been our guy. I think he was in such good form, actually. I say he still would have been our guy. If he hadn't got injured, he would have been sold. Somebody would have bought him for big money. That's how high his stock was. It seems really funny looking at this as a historical event because it ain't that long ago, 2018. But there you go. Such is the turnover at West Ham. Obiang came on. I think Obiang may well have been retained. I mean, you look at that with Kouyate and Obiang in there, and there is and Fernandes as well, of course. There's a little bit of depth there, which arguably we don't have at the moment. The forward was Marko Arnautovic. Now, you don't need me to tell you that he switched Arnautovic from a winger to a forward. Well, whilst that is true, you can only assume had Moyes have stayed on, Arnautovic's form would have continued. We may not have even seen Mikel Antonio, who's not featured in the squad for this game, by the way. We may not have even seen him playing as a striker. You never know. Maybe Antonio would have played as the backup to Arnautovic and whatnot. But I still believe, much like Lanzini, when David Moyes came in, their stock had risen. They were quite an effective partnership. I know Lanzini was not quite what you'd call a forward, but he was joining up with Arnautovic quite a lot, getting into attacking positions. As you can see from this game, he scored 2 goals, Lanzini. But I do think Arnautovic, like Lanzini, I still think the tantrum would have happened. I still think his brother Daniel would have kicked off and they would have just pressed for a move. So I think the same thing happens in there. We'll go through the substitutes bench. Well, 3 of them we discussed already. Carroll, he just would have gone. That wouldn't have continued anyway. It's quite interesting because you got the impression he wasn't mad about Carroll, which is sort of strangely familiar, really. Big target man who wasn't particularly mobile. Obiang we discussed. Hernandez, well, he just would have gone. Collins, we've discussed. Joe Hart in goal. Don't know. Would Joe Hart have stayed as second choice to Adrian? Don't know. Would Joe Hart have made it as first choice? Hard to see. Patrice Evra. Again, we sort of forget about him, don't we? He would have gone. He was too old, really. Anyway, he just came in to bulk up the numbers a little bit, didn't he? In January, and of course Fernandes. Maybe he'd have stayed. I don't know. I don't know if did he go to Fiorentina? Maybe he went to Fiorentina. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he's done anything there. So the team itself, we already know a lot of them because they're in the team now. But I do think that, as I say, the interesting ones, João Mário in particular, in there, and Kouyate, I just think they would have stayed, as I mentioned. And the Rice one is interesting. Hadn't given it any thought until I looked at the team. Well, no, Rice wouldn't have become a midfielder under David Moyes. David Moyes, maybe you look at central midfield. Maybe he buys Souček in the end. Maybe he's playing with Kouyate and Souček. But there's a parameter that we've not drawn into this yet, which is the 100 million. We've not discussed 100 million yet. So you've got that, I don't know, little the foundation of a squad there of players. What would he have added to it? Who would he have spent big on? Well, he told us. He said he wanted to buy defenders. He said we score enough goals. We score plenty of goals. It's at the back we need to sort out. Now, that gives the indication that clearly he didn't see Declan Rice as starting the next season. So if David Moyes has stayed, Declan Rice don't start the next season. Whereas pretty much He does for Pellegrini. He just features for Pellegrini. Now let's look at Pellegrini's signings. Pellegrini brings in Ryan Fredericks. He was already being scouted. That's just the case. I think that is whether Moyes scouted him and Sullivan got it over the line, or it was just a Sullivan signing. Hard to say. I would imagine that if it was Fredericks was purely a Moyes signing, then number one, Ngakia, and number two, Soufal wouldn't have budged him from the team as easily as they have. Leads me to believe Ryan Fredericks was a Sullivan signing. I'm just reading between the lines. Lucas Fabianski. It's so hard to say. I don't know. Would Moyes have bought a new keeper? I think he may well have done. Possibility Adrian stays with Joe Hart we discussed. But I think if he has all that money, that big money to spend, maybe spending a little bit more than the 7 million we spent on Fabianski. I do think that's interesting. Issa Diop. Not a chance we would have bought Issa Diop. Not a chance. 22 million rising to 25. That's what we paid for him. You've heard Moyes speak. Wants experienced defenders. That doesn't mean he wants a 50-year-old bloke in there, by the way. He's quite happy. You know, he would like you to have 200 appearances, 100 appearances, something like that. Just can't see him signing Diop. Really can't. Yarmolenko, not a chance. Would not have signed Yarmolenko. It's just wouldn't have happened. The next one, you don't need me to answer. Jack Wilshere. He wouldn't have signed Jack Wilshere. Felipe Anderson. No, he wouldn't have signed him. Now you're thinking, oh, well, I am. Wow, you know, he really got a lot of money to spend. I sound like a cat then. I just meowed. He spent a lot of money. Pellegrini, Felipe Anderson, whatever. I don't know if the article actually says it. We know it is about 36 odd million. It says it was 42 million. But I don't think it was. I don't think he'd have bought him. Balbuena, I don't think he'd have bought him. Carlos Sanchez, the same again. It is really hard to make a case for David Moyes signing any of these guys that Pellegrini signed. As we discussed, Fredericks, I'm not even sure Pellegrini signed him. I mean, it's really, really funny. Lucas Perez, no. Zande Silva, Moyes, he wouldn't have signed Zande Silva. Samir Nasri. Can you imagine? He hadn't even been playing. Mind you, he signed Everett, didn't he, I guess? But different time, different player. Not a chance. Roberto, yeah, right, of course. David Martin, don't think it would happen. The fornicator. Moyes, he loves the fornicator. We know this. But when he came in, he wasn't featuring in the team. When Moyes came in for his second stint, he just wasn't part of it. You feel that Fornals has had to grow on Moyes and convince him. I think we just would have signed João Mário. I really do. I think it's as simple as that. Sebastian Haller at 45 million. Forget it. Again, forget it. And it just goes to show you the importance of having a director of football that is not influenced by the manager. Husilos, ideally, shouldn't have been the director of football. He should have had nothing to do with Pellegrini. They almost barely know each other. So what you know is, once one manager goes, the next manager comes in is going to like the players that you've got. This is absolutely ludicrous. Now, we don't know this as fact. This is pure supposition. I do not know at all that David Moyes wouldn't have signed any of these Pellegrini signings. But I suspect as much. I suspect he wouldn't. And I'm pretty sure the majority of you will agree with me. Cardoso, would he have signed Cardoso? No. Of course he wouldn't. Ajeti? No. Those are Pellegrini signings. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that all those signings are bad. Some of them have been all right. You know, let's be fair. But that begs the question, what would Moyes have done? What would Moyes have done with that money? And this falls into another question, because I think what you've always got to do is strengthen your first team. I don't see any point in spending big money on players for the bench. Benrahma has to play in the team. Eventually, once he's got to fitness and all the rest of it. Why? Because West Ham are not good enough to buy players for 30 million quid and have them on the bench. David Moyes has to look at his team and think, okay, I've got 30 million to spend. I'm going to improve this position, that position, that position. So if David Moyes' team was, let's say, Adrian, wouldn't be Declan Rice, okay, because he bought another central defender. We know he's going to buy a central defender. Ogbonna Cresswell. Zabaleta, no, he'd have bought a different right wing back. He would have done. That's where he would have spent money on, right wing back. I think he's keeping Kouyate. I think you've got another midfielder to go in there. I actually think if David Moyes has stayed the first time around, he's signing, and he's got 100 million, and then whatever with a Sebastian Haller, all that money that Pellegrini had to spend. Centre back, right wing back, he's still playing 3-5-2, by the way. Central midfielder, and a striker. I'm not saying that's all he buys, but that's what he would do. Which one of those? I don't know. You're going to have to decide this. But if you imagine you've got those positions, I would be interested to see what you think, actually. So you've got, so it was 100 million in the first window. I know we recouped it, didn't we, for Haller. Let's say 120 million, for argument's sake. You basically, here's your game. You've got 120 million to play with. Centre half, right-sided centre half, right wing back, central midfielder, to play alongside Kouyate. That's what I think. It's a game, isn't it? And striker. 4 players. 120 million. There you go. Logan, thank you for suggesting that. I actually really quite enjoyed doing that. Probably enjoyed it more than you did watching it, in all honesty. There were a few comments when I said I was going to do this video. One of them said, if Moyes had stayed on the first stint, we would have signed Fellaini. He would have signed Fellaini, and Sullivan wouldn't have given him the 100 million. And that would have been it. Now, I understand, and I think there is some reason to suspect that might have happened. But that wouldn't have made a very good or a very long video. That would just be me saying, there's no 100 million, he signs nobody, Fellaini comes in. But I guess you get your answer as to who plays alongside Checo Kouyate. But I do think it's really, really interesting, particularly all the bits from David Moyes' press conferences, and maybe this is something we'll look in a little bit, just a little bit more detail, because it's just what I found funny. Sorry, I need to stop waffling now. I've been talking for ages. What I do find funny is just how much things have changed in such a short period of time, and quite how much getting the wrong managerial appointment can rock the boat. It doesn't matter whether you think David Moyes is the right or wrong managerial appointment here. But having Moyes, sacking him, and all his staff, is the baby and the bathwater has gone out. Sacking Moyes, all his staff, getting Pellegrini, getting rid of Pellegrini and bringing Moyes in again. I don't know why it was there and there. It's not a clever move. It has not provided. And it actually, when I look at the team and I look at the composition of the team, there's a lot of similarities about it. The system is the same. There's a lot of the personnel that are the same. What David Moyes is trying to do is the same. You listen to his interview, and when he's talking about the Everton game, and he's saying, well, actually, we've been playing well in the build-up to this. This is how we play. This is how I want us to play. And you think, oh, well, actually, it is. That's how it's been borne out. And also, do you remember, David Moyes got an awful lot of stick. David Moyes decided to take the players for a break to Miami. He got a lot of stick. A lot of people were saying, you shouldn't be taking them out. The players have done nothing because we were in the bottom 3. The players don't deserve a treat. They don't deserve any. And he stuck by it. He said, no, I'm going to take them away. I think they need a break. We're going to have a bit of sunshine, a bit of relaxation, some warm weather training. We're going to bring them back and come back refreshed. It worked. You look at our running from that Miami trip, and even there's games where we didn't win, like against Leicester and stuff like that, where we actually played really, really well. And he's talking about what he wants to do. And all I can say is he's now starting to do it. So what do we think? That thing of Pellegrini in the middle? I don't know what Moyes would have done the 100 million. But I do know one thing is for certain. Bearing in mind where we started with Moyes and bearing in mind where we've ended up now, the actual evolution of it is exactly as you'd imagine. It's just like it stopped. Someone else was plonked in the middle. So it ran along there, someone else plonked in the middle, then it carried on doing that. Basically, that bit in the middle was 18 months. What have we done by appointing Pellegrini? We have basically prolonged our evolution by 18 months. We've cost ourselves 18 months and 120 million quid.